Hello, hello. Welcome to today's webinar. It's so wonderful to see everyone here. Thank you for being here. I am so pleased to be with Bria Leto today for this webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started in just a few. I'm going to share my screen yet again and go over some logistics for today's meeting. As Kevin wrote in the chat, please be active in the chat. We'd love to hear from you throughout this event. You'll see at the bottom of the screen as well a Q&A function. Please use that to ask questions to Bree throughout the event, and we'll look forward to hearing from you. So to get us started, just a little bit of an agenda to let us know that we're going to start with a chat with Bree. We have questions that we're really excited to ask her, get digging into her career. And then we'll have time for audience Q&A. I know some of you folks submitted questions ahead of time, so thank you for doing that. But again, please feel free to use the Q&A function to ask questions during. And before we start, I just want to say a humongous thank you to everyone who is here for making Presales Collective possible. We're a community of 21,000 and growing all over the world, and it is because of people like you and the way that you engage with our community and continue to contribute that makes this place so special. So thank you so much for being here. As I mentioned, ways to get the most out of the webinar today. You're going to want to ask questions using the Q&A function, and please be active in the chat. I will be monitoring it throughout the event today. We are also incredibly proud to have Consensus sponsor this event. Consensus is an intelligent automation demo software that was built to help you scale pre-sales. They're used by leading companies in a variety of industries to bring prospects to live demos, better educated and ready to talk specifics about your products. Using Consensus, your sales engineering team builds a library of reusable, interactive video demos that sales sends out on demand. Consensus automatically personalizes the experience and tracks engagement. This reduces unqualified demos to near zero and can double your pre-sales team's productivity. Their growth and statistics validate the approach, the two most impressive being that almost 3 million stakeholders discovered through the use of automated demos by sales, and the average cost of demo when you compare to the automated to the price of having your team delivering live demos. So if you'd like to see an automated demo for yourself, you can check them out at goconsensus.com. All right. And now for the reason why everyone is here. I am so pleased to welcome again, Bree. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited for this conversation. I feel like we've been talking about this for so long, so it's nice to finally be here.
Yeah, we're like best friends by now.
We are best friends by now. Sorry, everyone, it's true. How are you doing today?
Great. I'm excited about this. I feel very strongly about solutions engineering, so this is exciting to be focused on this group.
Wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump in. And I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about your career journey, the sort of bird's eye view overhead. How did you get into pre-sales and how did you land your current position?
Yeah, well, it's funny because of course I was never going to go into sales and I was definitely never going to go into software. Just like everybody else, goes to college and, they inevitably get their dream job right out of school, which I wanted to be either a meteorologist or somehow, some way on television. And so needless to say, I graduated in 2009. And for any of you that were looking for jobs around that time, no one was hiring. So I took basically an entry-level customer service rep job, answering calls basically for a software company for customer support. I remember, kind of thinking this is not at all what I envisioned. I'm going to only do this for a short period of time and then I'm going to move on. This is not my dream job, all these elements. Fast forward to today, we still have customer service reps at our companies. I'm a firm believer in that type of a role to learn the product, learn your customers, learn the business, learn the industry. So of course at 22, I didn't know everything. And so throughout that process, I stayed in customer service for a certain amount of time, couple months, and then basically just started learning different departments. And again, why I think that it's pivotal to get some of that experience is I was able to look and see kind of the different elements of the business related to operations and implementation and then sales and marketing. So I actually ended up in operations for a short period of time under account management. And quickly came to find that I was driven towards sales. I always joke that sales to me was like dating and customer account management's more like marriage, which nothing against marriage. I'm married now. So at the time of my life, though, sales was really exciting and fun. And so I went into sales and didn't necessarily want to be a quota carrying rep because I was very interested in the product. And so sales engineering just fell into my lap and felt very natural to me. Being more of like the person, like the good cop on the sales types of meetings. I always, like I said, I like to joke a lot, but basically viewing the sales engineer as like the entertainment for a party, and having the sales rep do all the pre-work and then all the follow-ups and the thank you notes and basically do all the cleanup work. So I just found this niche of what I loved doing, which was doing these sales pitches and being a part of the sales team. And then also recognizing pretty quickly how much that role spans into other departments. So I ended up taking on marketing at my last company and running sales and marketing for a good portion of time, mostly sales engineering and marketing, not the quota carrying reps. And then, that incorporated product marketing and elements that, again, are very driven towards the product. And then in my most recent role, obviously as CEO, I joined the company actually to run operations, which I had not done before. I think you and I were talking a little bit about imposter syndrome. So happy to talk about that with anyone on the call that might experience that from time to time. But I came to realize how quickly so many things I had learned in my sales engineering experience were playing a part in operations. So even though it was running implementation and customer success, which was something that, again, I had done a little bit of in my prior life, but not a ton of, so many skills and things that I had learned in my sales engineering experience came to play. And it just set me up to be a really good candidate for the CEO promotion. And so, here I've been the CEO for almost a year now, and it's just been an incredible experience, and happy to talk about that more.
That's so amazing, Brie. I love the describing sales engineers as the entertainer. That's such a fun way of thinking about it. I think a lot of folks on the call may agree, they get to have the spotlight and really make an impact, which is what an entertainer does. I just love that. So I'm curious, did you always have dreams of leadership, being a CEO, and if you did, wonderful. When did that come about? And if you didn't, when did that come to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. It's wavered. So, and I'm sure people on the call feel that way as well. So I grew up, doing student government and being very much in leadership type of roles. So it would be hard for me to say that I never thought I'd be in a leadership position. But as many people, again, I'm sure have experienced different changes in their lives, having kids, experiencing, being on the road a lot and traveling, I've wavered and thinking like, maybe management isn't for me. Maybe I need to take a sole contributor job, which I think is a great path for a lot of people that have sales engineering backgrounds and want to have a lucrative career. I think that's a great option. For me, I think, mentoring and recognizing. So I think the moment, and again, it's funny because I want to have like a one-on-one conversation with every sales engineer on the call, because I think you can probably relate, is when you start to grow your team for the first time and you're starting to hand off some of the big sales deals and sales pitches that you've always owned yourself. It's a learning process, and it's really hard, and you want to grasp on because it's like your commissions and it's your reputation, and it's, you hear somebody ask a functionality question and you can jump in and answer it better than anybody else. But it's that moment where you recognize, like, if I don't delegate and start to train the people under me, I'm going to be pigeonholed here. And so I think that was really the moment where I started to see others on my team being able to step up and travel for me or take on some of the responsibilities that I recognize the importance of mentorship. And I think that's when I got kind of hooked on it. And so, yeah, since then been leading teams and obviously now leading the company.
That's awesome. And I wonder actually if we can double click on that, like becoming a mentor conversation, because that comes up a lot on our webinars and also in our community. When people are moving from the IC role to the manager role, there is a really, I think, a surprise that a lot of people feel passing off their, what I will call, for lack of a better term, like their babies, like their customers, these people that they've built relationships with. Do you have any like quick bits of like tactical advice about how to make that transition more smooth and how to embrace that change, and get through the fear that, something could go wrong if you don't have the reins totally in control?
For sure. Yeah, it's funny. I actually read a book recently, and it's basically talking about how you go from being an expert leader, where basically you're the person in the room that everybody's asking the question to. And again, I'm sure many can relate. When a prospect's sitting in the room, you're quote unquote the expert, the good cop, as I like to call you. And people are looking to you. And all of a sudden you're taking a step back and you're being what's called a spanning leader. And really, you're no longer the expert. You're becoming really the overarching mentor. And so, it is a difficult difficult element, because in your mind, I think that's where maybe like the imposter syndrome comes into play, where it's like, but that's what I'm good at. So what if I can't be on those sales meetings and they start to rely on someone else? What will I have to offer? And what you're not recognizing is that you have so much to offer, of course, that you don't recognize quite yet. And being able to understand and empower your teams will inevitably make you the best leader. So just being willing to take a back seat, it's going to take some time. I think the biggest thing for me was sitting in on meetings with people and helping them understand, like, I'm not going to steal the spotlight. I want you to become, like, being truly unconditionally supportive. I want you to become the new expert leader. This is my job to now be just your mentor and also kind of the quote unquote spanning leader. And so, it was tricky at first. And what I will say is the best thing I learned was putting it back onto the new sales engineers or solutions consultants, as we call them sometimes, is you tag me in if you think you need help. So let them kind of fall, let them figure it out on their own as well. And versus jumping in every time, being ready to say, hey, you should have tapped me in there. Like, that was over your head, and giving them that feedback. So I think that was really the core. So then they also feel like you have they have credibility, they can build that in the meeting, and you have their back, versus them being worried that you're going to take their sales deal or that you're always going to be better than them kind of feel.
Totally. That's such great advice. Thanks so much for digging in there a little bit. So switching gears about, getting into the CEO role, it sounds like, when you were working this operations role at your company, there was a path that was laid or that became available to you. How did you gain visibility to make sure that you were set up for success in order to be a viable applicant for the role?
Yeah, good question. And again, I feel like hopefully I'm resonating with some of you out there in the audience, because when you become the go-to person for a lot of sales related items and or product related items, you can feel pigeonholed, and it's hard to get yourself out of that. And so I think the biggest thing that I learned very quickly was kind of inserting myself other places as well. So ensuring that you have a seat at the table when you're talking about product roadmap, and ensuring you have a seat at the table when they're doing customer events. Like, you should be there and you should be participating and talking to customers. Implementations that are maybe going awry, making sure that you're a part of that conversation. You feel confident. Maybe there was something that maybe you overstepped on in the sales process, but that you own that, and you're having those constant relationship building blocks or building relationships with the different departments across the company. It gave me such visibility into understanding how they're all interconnected, and that sales cannot be siloed whatsoever, or everything downstream is going to fall apart. And so being that connective tissue, you'll learn I'm not great with words, but being that kind of like that fiber across the different departments gave me such great visibility. And I would say, don't ever let a leader, and I think we'll talk about this here in a little bit by way of mentors and things, don't ever let a leader try to pigeonhole you or just tell you that you're a salesperson, because you're not. You are truly, you should be thinking of yourself as like a chief strategy person across the entire business, because you should have your hand everywhere. You should be talking about where the product needs to go based on the market feedback. You should be working with implementation to make sure you're up to snuff on what are the most recent configurations that have been built for different customers, so that you can be presenting those during the sales pitch and making implementation a little bit smoother. Same with customer anecdotes, working with your customer success team every single week to understand how are our customers using our product, how can I be exemplifying those anecdotes in my presentations, all the way through. Again, it really is across the entire business that I think you can really roll up your sleeves and make sure you're getting that experience. And so to finish out, I think by way of having built relationships with every department, I think it was just a clear decision. Hopefully, I can't speak for, our board and our prior founder and CEO who nominated me as CEO, but I think having the understanding and kind of the overarching visibility into how everything needs to connect and we all need to be driven by one vision is extremely important. And I don't think there are many roles in the business that get that type of visibility as a sales engineering person does.
That's wonderful. I was just about to say, it sounds like what you're painting the picture of is that sales engineers are actually uniquely positioned to have their hands in multiple different buckets at the same time. And so the rise from SE to CEO is actually much more accessible when you start thinking of yourself as like this. I love this vision of like the connective tissue. It's like an octopus with multiple different arms. You know, you can have your hands because it serves your role. But at the end of the day, if you have dreams of higher leadership, it positions you really well to be a voice for everyone coming together, which is what the CEO and president, you know, wants to do, which is just awesome. That's such a great image and such a great way of thinking about the role. So I did a little bit of research about you before we met for the first time, and there was an announcement about your appointment. I'm just going to read something from the announcement to ask my next question. So it was noted that you know, Bree's ability to understand complex and highly sophisticated markets is unparalleled, and her ability to motivate and energize teams is second to none. It's awesome. I want to work for you. It's amazing. So what do you think makes an incredible leader? And can you share any advice for first-time leaders? And then the third question is, how can seasoned leaders find a new way to inspire their teams? So what do you think is great leadership?
Yep.
Advice for first times leaders and people who've been in leadership, how can they spice up their leadership style?
Yeah. And I'll try to not sound like totally cliche, because I think some of the things that, you know, make a great leader are a little cliche and are exactly what you would expect. Like, you know, you got to surround yourself with the right people. You've got to empower your people to do their best work. You've got to reward. You also need to have tough conversations. So some of these are obvious, but I would say they were harder for me. So I'm a cheerleader at heart. Growing up, that was me. I've always been somebody that can cheer other people on and root for them. However, very hard for me to be thinking about how to give really constructive feedback and how to not shy away from tough conversations. The faster I think you can learn that, the better off you're going to be, the further you're going to go. And then the other element is leaning into your weaknesses. So again, like, I'm not going to sit here. Hopefully this is something a little different than what everybody might say. But something I've learned is being able to lean into my weaknesses. I saw a question that came through about going to business school, and I did not go to business school. But, you know, I think finance will never be my specialty. And you'll find different CEOs. Each of you probably work for a different type of CEO, whether they're finance minded, they're product and technology minded, they're sales and go-to-market focused. Oftentimes they have some form of specialty. And obviously, I think anybody that would be on this phone would be, or on this call, would be more go-to-market focused if they were to become a CEO someday, similar to myself, which is extremely pivotal for high growth organizations that have oftentimes financial backing. And so I'm happy to talk to anybody about that offline if you want to learn a little bit more about what that means specifically. But, you know, I think being able to lean in and say, finance is not my strong suit. And instead of forcing myself to go to business school and be tortured and learn all different ins and outs of, you know, things that I don't even know the definitions of, let alone how to tick and tie all the balance sheets and the income statements that we've got to manage on a monthly and quarterly basis, surround yourself with the right people to just essentially fill those gaps. And so I've got an incredible CFO. We've got incredible people around the table that, instead of being, you know, again, imposter syndrome, instead of being worried and insecure about what I'm maybe weaker in, I'm leaning into what I'm good at. I'm great at empowering people. I'm great at, you know, being the people leader, good at, you know, building momentum and making sure we can continue to grow the business, thinking ahead around what does our product need to do so that we can effectively compete in the market and stay ahead of the game. And again, I think those are probably skills that a lot of the SCs on this call have learned by way of being in market. And so whether you're meeting with customers as a CEO, you're meeting with prospects as a CEO, or you're just meeting with your internal team, it's constantly thinking through, what do I need to do to keep people motivated and keep the momentum high and continue to grow this business? Because again, if you're a sales focused go-to-market CEO, it oftentimes you've been brought in to grow the business. So you got to be thinking about your customers and your prospects and how you're going to grow new logos and how you're going to expand your existing customer base.
That's fantastic. And do you have any, you know, notes for these more seasoned leaders who maybe have gotten to their routine of how they lead and some of the ways that you've found to re-inspire your teams or continue to inspire them?
Yeah, so it's interesting, you know, obviously as the workforce has kind of shifted and changed, and a lot of people are now working from home. So trying to build in the culture element is tricky. And that can often be what is your differentiator as an employer. So for us, again, in a lot of these high growth companies, and we're in Colorado, so it's pretty competitive by way of the labor market. You cannot be necessarily always the highest paying employer. So you've got to find other ways of connecting with your employee base. We did an engagement survey across our employees. And since many of them are new in their career, they're very motivated by personal development. So we've done a lot of work. We've got an incredible, couple people leaders basically here at the business, where I'll tell you, a couple years ago, you didn't have a chief people officer. You didn't have somebody that was just, focused on employment experience. You have to prioritize that. So otherwise you're not going to retain your people. And at the end of the day, like, your people are everything to help grow the business. And so I would say, if the people component, as quote unquote soft as you might consider it, is absolutely pivotal in today's market. You've got to be thinking about, what are the additional perks outside of just compensation that I can offer my employees. Having flexible work schedules. Again, some of this is hopefully well known by this point, but in our experience, we've got 60-ish employees. I'm very clear with people, like, I've got little kids. I understand life happens. We've got to have each other's backs, and we've got to be one company, and so we're pretty transparent and clear when something's going on in our lives, and we try to just trust each other. We've leaned into our core values significantly during COVID, which are trust and transparency being one of them. And so when people are, working from home, we're trusting that that's what they're doing. And we're very transparent. If something's going on, totally flexible around, hey, my kid's got XYZ going on. I'm going to be out for a couple hours. I'll see you tonight on Slack, and hopefully we can catch up on, whatever customer, whatever it might be. But I think that's been a core component, is just being willing and ready to be flexible with your people, or you're not going to be able to compete in today's market. I worked for a CEO for many years who was very much like 8 to 6. I'm clocking in. You gotta, if I don't see you in here in the morning, you're not doing your job. If you're not walking fast through the office, you're going to get fired because you must not have enough to do. We got to shift from that thinking. We've got to. And so I think that's a big component.
It's incredibly archaic, this idea that, like, the robotic employee, and to talk, I love how you're speaking about this, about the humanity inside of a work culture being the differentiator for some people to stay at a company or not. And as leaders are thinking about the ways in which, we can deepen our employee experience, you're right, at a certain point, like, you can't pay your employees like all as much money as you probably would want to, or if you can, like, that's actually not enough. Like, compensation is total compensation. How does it feel to work in the workplace? How does it feel to come to work every day? And that, I think, is the difference between people staying at their jobs potentially and not, which is, I love the way you pick that. I also want to go back and just highlight something you said before about, your personal leadership and the acknowledgement about your strengths. And I just want to thank you for acknowledging, that, like, your skill set is not finance, yet you are still the CEO of, like, a super awesome, amazing, large company. Like, I feel like so often we're in these conversations and it's the perception of a CEO is, like, excellent in every single thing, and no person is excellent in every single thing. There's no way. And so when you said that, I felt like something softened in myself of, like, oh, well, like, maybe I don't need to go get an MBA if I do ever want to be, a leader of this caliber. So thank you for naming that, because I think that there's such a benefit of the humility around how we talk about ourselves and our roles. And that really impacted me. So thank you for naming that.
It's funny. I'll tell you, I think it helps build a human relationship, like you're saying, to everybody at the business too. There are times when, for some reason, I'm a little more nervous to get up in front of the company and talk to them. And I'll go to, some of the ladies in the restroom as we're getting ready at the Christmas party or the holiday party and say, hey, can you pump me up? Like, I need to pump up to do this. And you just gotta, we've got to all be willing to collaborate with each other and also recognize, like, to your point, we're all human. One thing that I didn't mention that I think is important as we're talking about, kind of like long-term leaders and what you've learned. I think, we've leaned on EOS, which is Entrepreneurial Operating Systems, which is just a pretty standardized version of how you can run a business. So if you're not familiar with it, I'd recommend going and familiarizing yourself with it because it's a really easy operating model that can be implemented. And by easy, I say that because I inherited it, but it's a really great operating model and rhythm that you can get a business into to really help with the collaboration. But one tool that they use is called GWC, and it's for for evaluating your employees. And it's called Get It, Want It, Capacity to Do It. And I would say the sooner you can use that across your employee base, the more effective you're going to be, because it's having tough conversations with people that maybe they get it, maybe they have the capacity to do it, but you can tell they don't want it. And, or vice versa. They get it, they want it, but they're just, there's a skill gap that might be missing somewhat to get them to the next level. And just using that framework and being able to lean into it to say, this is what we use. Here's how I've assessed you. It gives you something to fall back on. And the sooner you can, especially in a smaller business with sub 100 employees, every person's pivotal. So they better be in the right role. And we call it the right person, right seat. They better be in the right role and they better want it. And so I think having those frank conversations is really pivotal. And just being honest with yourself. Like you maybe had people with you for a long time and being able, I came into this business that had been here for 15 years and then became the CEO very quickly thereafter. And so you have people here that have been working for 10, 11, 12 years, and they're looking to me now as their manager, which is a little uncomfortable, as you can imagine. And so realizing and being frank, like, is this someone that wants this still? Or is this someone that's kind of become just a part of the company thread that we need to have an honest conversation with? And same is true for new employees too. So it goes across the board, and it's just an easy tool to lean into that. Like I said, I'm happy as a follow-up, I can provide that to anybody.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. So I'm going to shift us a little bit to talk about mentorship, because it's such a big part of your story. And we've actually gotten a couple questions in about mentorship as well. So I'd love to dig in there. So how have you been served by mentorship in your career? You talked about this a little bit in your introduction about the people who were sort of your champions and how that worked. And if you have any advice on how to secure an advisor to support your career goals, I think a lot of questions that folks have are really about, like, I want to be mentored, but going up to somebody in a room and being like, will you mentor me? Doesn't work very well, especially at large companies when people don't have a lot of time, or even small companies where no one has time. No one ever has time. So how do you secure a mentor? What does that process look like? And how have you been served by a mentor in your career?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the first and foremost, I think I mentioned this before, is hopefully you're working for someone that recognizes the pivotal nature of a sales engineer, because if they don't, go find somewhere else, because at the end of the day, as I've mentioned many times, you are the connective tissue across the entire business. If they are not respectful of the fact that you're being pulled in many different directions in your role, and also the visibility that you have, then you should find a company that does respect that, because there are companies out there and there are mentors that do. And so I was fortunate enough to work for someone for a long time who really recognized how pivotal this role was, and finding the right people to have in it, and also trusting my decisions when, again, somebody didn't get it or want it or have the capacity to do it and be willing to move on. So I think you've got to be picky about your mentor. Again, they've got to understand and respect, the sales engineering role. And then I, of course, am not a shy person, but I do think, if you can offer them something as well, around, hey, I noticed maybe XYZ is stressing you out. This is something I could take on. I'm happy to mentor maybe somebody that's under them. Or, there are certain things that you could, people are selfish creatures in general. So I'm sure if there is some way, shape, or form that you can offer them something as well, in return. Hey, I know, for example, maybe it's the head of customer operations and you really want to learn operations. It's like, hey, I'd be happy to participate in some of your cross-sell, upsell meetings, and or mentor your team a little bit on some of the product components of go-to-market. If you don't mind, like, I could pick your brain a little bit about, operational elements, sit in on some of your meetings and be able to learn from, what are the things that you're experiencing and how have you navigated them? Pick apart a finance meeting, ask, the CFO to say, hey, I know there's certain sensitive documents maybe you can't share with me, but I would love to learn as much as I can. I'll take, you just send me some materials. I'll come back with questions. So it's not just you showing up and saying, teach me finance. but actually going through and saying, hey, here were the KPIs we talked about at the board meeting. I noticed like this one I don't totally understand. Can you dig into it a little bit? If they're unwilling to help you, they're not a good mentor. So you shouldn't be asking them or working with them anyway. But I'm happy to, like I said, I think the quid pro quo is always a good way to approach a conversation. And then I think, of course, coming prepared and being ready. Brian Carr, who actually, is the one that introduced me to this opportunity here. I had a breakfast with him and, totally out of the blue, hadn't really met him before, but came completely prepared, had tons of questions to ask, used the time effectively, which was much appreciated on my end. And he's now become a resource for me as well. So, I think that's, as we're looking for sales engineers, I know I can go reach out to him and ask him, hey, do you have anybody in your network? So it is really about, making sure you understand they also probably have something that you can offer them, or I'm sorry, you probably have something that you can offer to them. I hope I said that right. And just keeping that in mind and making sure that you're confident in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's something so wonderful about, people love to talk about the things that they're passionate about. And if you go to your CFO and you're like, I want to learn about finance, that's probably the best question they've been asked all day, because people will also are normally asking them like, why are these numbers so low or high? But if they got to talk about their passion, I think folks are really inclined to do that. And when you can, I love what you said, make yourself valuable to them, offer to sit in on a meeting, offer to take notes, offer to, be around their world, and then come with questions to engage them. I mean, I just think that folks are really gravitate towards people who are excited about what they do. So that's awesome.
And it's not one mentor. Like, I think that at the end of the day, is the core component. You're not going to be able to find, just like I can't offer, and any mentees, all the skills. You've got to find different people based on what you're looking for. So if you're looking to become a CEO, then again, maybe you need to expand your reach in finance and operations. Or if you're looking to become a CRO, it might be learning more about quota carrying sales opportunities and what does that look like to actually carry a bag. And, you want to run marketing as well. Like, you're going to have to spend some time with somebody maybe from a marketing standpoint. So, and there are tons of resources out there now. I mean, LinkedIn Learning and tons of different tools that can be leveraged just to get your feet wet. And then when you're ready to start being able to branch out and ask different questions that are a little more educated than just kind of coming with a blank slate.
That's fantastic. I'm actually going to move to an audience question. Katie's asking about how you would recommend finding a mentor when you're a bit more of a senior of a leader, especially at a small company. Noting that, it's hard to find a mentor when you are the one that is doing a lot of mentoring. And there aren't many people above you at your own company. So I wonder if you can speak to a little bit about how someone who's more senior would find it. And also, what does finding mentorship outside of your own company look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, even being a part of something like Pre-Sales Collective is a great step in the right direction if you're doing that. And also recognizing that you're going to learn things from people all up and down the food chain. So there are people that, again, might be below you that you could learn some things from as well. So not just thinking it's always got to be somebody that's, in a higher title. But with that being said, I know for me, and again, this might not equate to anybody else, but if you understand what the financial backing is for your business, so it just so happens that ours is backed by a private equity company who have other portfolio companies that they own. And so a great networking opportunity for me was to talk to our board of directors and basically say, are there other CEOs in the network that I can talk to? Their industry might be very different, but likely their experience in working with a board and trying to grow a business and managing to KPIs could be very similar. So I think that is one option. Again, that might be trickier for you if your company might be bootstrapped and it's, founder led, and maybe you've learned what you feel like you can learn thus far from your founder. And so I would encourage you, you got to kind of think outside the box. Definitely be joining different groups. There's, EO, there's YPO, there's, I want to call it Vistage, but I don't know if that's exactly what it's called because I'm not a part of that one, but there are a lot of networking groups that you can get into. And even if you're not a CEO or a president, you can still oftentimes join those groups. And then you can be mentoring and meeting people through those groups as well. So I just wouldn't be shy. And then also having a list of what you want, like where do you want to get to, and what do you need to work on, or what do you want to learn about? So again, for me, I really needed to get some more experience in the operational front and a little bit of finance. So understanding that that's what I wanted. And so just doing my research based on that. So again, if you could go to your board of directors and certainly ask them, hey, do you have any network that I can tap into for operational leaders? I want to understand a little bit more about, KPIs related to retention or things that are more customer centric, and being able to tap into someone that's even higher level. And don't be worried about making that comment to your CEO. Again, the right mentors and the right CEOs should understand and be excited to have leaders that want to be continuing to get developed. I'll tell you, as an engagement survey and seeing that our employees are asking for more development, like if I can give somebody enough opportunity at our business to get developed, and then inevitably they graduate from us because we don't have enough opportunity for them, that's a great thing. And I'm totally willing to have that open conversation with them because I want the best thing for them too. And so if you're not finding that in a leader, I think having that honest conversation with yourself, and being willing to go around where you need to make sure you're getting the mentorship and the development that you need. And you've got to keep networking. Like you just got to be willing and ready to put yourself out there, and just, it's going to be uncomfortable. And there are going to be times, like I had an incredible person that met with me. I remember when I was kind of trying to go through one of those times where you're not exactly sure what you're going to do next. And I came super prepared. And he said to me, I take meetings, people sit on this couch all day long and ask for favors from me. And he's like, you just coming in humble and prepared was all I needed to know that you've got a big future. So just be ready. Like, it's okay to, like I said, be humble, but be confident and go in there prepared, and people are going to be willing to meet with you. And then down the line, just know you'll be that person that will always take a meeting and always be willing to open your couch up and, you got to be willing to, like I said, be humble for a little bit until things shift, and they will.
That's awesome. Thank you. So, you're not doing demos day to day anymore, or if you are, that's so incredible that you have the time for all of that. Assuming you're not doing demos much anymore, but that's where you started, right? So can you talk a little bit about the skills that an SE has or grows that you think stay forever and that you think have served you in your rise to CEO and like currently being president CEO of Alvia?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about this one because it comes up all the time now, that filling an SC role or an SE role is really hard. And so as you're like, we're actually looking for one, humble plug here, but trying to figure out, that right profile is extremely pivotal. Thank you for posting that link in there, Kevin, Johnny on the spot. So feel free to apply. But I think the biggest thing that I learned from solutions engineering and the best solutions engineers are those that ask a lot of questions. Again, it sounds cliche, but you've got to ask tons of questions to the prospect. And then you have to be thinking constantly about the value, not the functionality. Why? And like, what are they getting out of this? And the less you talk about actual pieces of functionality, the more successful you are. Again, I think that's the biggest thing that I try to train sales engineers on when I was running those teams is it's not what, it's how, it's why. Like never be clicking, like the less clicks oftentimes the better in a sales demonstration, because that means you're showing results versus just how you get there. So that's always a core component. And then like having like 3 or 4 different value statements constantly in every meeting that you go to. This is what matters to the prospect. This is what matters to the customer. It's true internally too. Like thinking and empathizing with the person that's sitting across the table from you, having entry-level employees potentially that are looking to build and grow their careers. Again, you learn a lot of this when you're sitting in a prospective meeting and you've got different parties that need different things based on, what perspective they're coming from in the business. You have to understand, like when you're sitting across the table from an engineer who's looking to get very different experience and have a very different work environment than someone that's looking to grow through marketing or sales or sales enablement, it's a different conversation. You got to really empathize and be thinking about what what types of experiences you gained in your sales engineering role and how you were able to play to different audiences based on really where they are and what their needs are.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So I'm going to move into some audience questions. We have some good ones that are in the chat. So I'd love to start with this one. How do you balance being a female in a highly male dominated environment and industry? A heavy hitter, but
That's funny. You know, the amount of rooms I feel like I've sat in where it's all men and just me. And I always have to joke that, you know, I'm carrying everybody on my back and it's really tiring. And, you know, you got to kind of have a little bit of sense of humor with it. But I also think I've been fortunate to work with so many amazing females up and down the business. I'm seeing some of the chats come through on some of the employees that we have currently today that are incredible female employees that I've learned so much from. And I think incorporating as many females as you can, I know I'm stating the obvious here, regardless, and getting them involved. We have an employee who rose very quickly in the ranks here and got some pretty solid technical chops pretty quickly. And, you know, she kind of was like, well, like, I don't have as much experience as the others. And I'm like, but you have your own experience and you have a totally different viewpoint that is extremely pivotal and they need to hear it. And so I think it's zeroing in for me. Like, I get empowered by empowering them. And so zeroing in on those employees gives me the knowledge, like, we're going to see them continue to grow and they're going to have a seat at the table with us. So it's not going to be just all men. But, you know, you can't just focus on your female employees as a female CEO, but I think it has given me energy. I will say that. And I'm super proud of them. And I think they need to see that, you know, you can be a female in a male dominated world, a male dominated industry segment. And so I think putting myself out there in different types of roles and being willing to, again, just laugh at myself a little and lean in weaknesses makes you a little more humble, and also gives, I think, anybody else the space to do something similar.
absolutely. I love that. You're talking about, once you rise, you have to look back behind you and see who else needs a hand up. And once you have the opportunity to be in any sort of leadership role, it sounds like, like from just a manager of like one person to when you're leading an entire team of people, your job, if you have access to make real impact, to provide accessibility and opportunities for diverse folks, whether it's in the hiring process or just in the promotion process, that also becomes your job, because you wouldn't have gotten there if someone didn't help you up a little bit. And so it's about continuing that cycle. And I think also, what the theme of a lot of what you're saying is like, look for your champions, like look for the people that are going to help you succeed and help you rise, because not everyone in the room wants to give you a seat at the table most of the time,
right.
some of the time. And so you have to look for the people that are wanting to pull
Great
that
point.
trigger for you.
For sure. For sure. And listen, for anybody that inevitably wants to try to balance family, I'm the first to admit, prior to kids, I was like, oh, well, if she's a mom or she's the, even the dads in the room, like they don't work as hard as the rest of us. Like I had that mindset. And so I think, some of it just comes with experience now, having kids myself and seeing like what a difference and what a perspective I can have now. Like my work, my quality, my quantity might not be the same amount that I was working before, but my quality is so much better because I'm so focused. And so I just have a new perspective. And I think that's really important to, again, have that mindset. And if you don't have leaders that are recognizing the fact that women do so much more shit than men, no offense, oftentimes in the household, and that they've got a lot of priorities that they're juggling, you've got to work for managers and leaders that way. And if you're surrounded by a bunch of men, no offense, that seem to be stuck in the old school way, you should probably figure out where else you could bring your talent.
For sure. Amen. There it is. I see another question in the chat about maintaining humility, which I think, you talk a lot about, and I experienced this from knowing you for the past couple of weeks and look forward to knowing you for longer, about, this sort of energy of humility. And it's a calm confidence that is very exciting to be around. And I know that like some of that is the soft skill of just who you are, but how do you maintain that sort of humility and softness about you without slipping into the imposter syndrome. I think sometimes, at least I find this for myself, my self-deprecation can go a little bit too far sometimes. And it sounds a lot like imposter syndrome and a lot like me apologizing for being in the room instead of me cracking a joke, which like, I love to crack jokes. You like to as well. So what is that line for you? And how can you self-correct when you sort of feel yourself edging into the imposter syndrome world?
Ooh, gosh, that's a good question. And it is a slippery slope because I agree. Like I can easily just crack a joke and kind of cut the tension in a room. But there are times when you kind of like healthy tension is necessary. And so you kind of have to like recognize that a little bit. So it's kind of interesting that you bring that up. And you asked a couple questions, so I hope I can cover off on them. But, the humility element, I will say it was really hard for me, to be honest, coming from, I've was in my early 20s a lot of times, and then going into a management role. So your friends that you made at work suddenly became your employees or your reports. And that's a really tough shift. I went through a time where it was like, okay, I got to remember, like, I'm not friends with them anymore. And like, we have to have hard conversations. And again, I think the sooner you learn, like having more direct conversations, the more people will respect you, and the more they will understand where you're coming from. And it builds some of that humility, I think, as well, being willing to have the conversations that nobody wants to have. Hey, there might not be a future here for you, but I want to help you to get that, to find something else. So let's build in, a couple weeks of just talking through and networking and finding you another opportunity. And I think that starts to grow your people's confidence. Like, people talk in your business. And so knowing that you have their back regardless is a really big component that I think, it's genuine. I mean it when I say I'm a people person, and it's true. And I care. But we do have a job to do, and we do have a business to run. And so I think it is always important to be willing to be confrontational when necessary. And they need to see that. I had a leader that said to me, you've got to make your mark. Every time you come into a new role, you kind of need to make sure people understand, like, I'm a people person. I want to learn about you. I have your back, but also we have a job to do. And so you do have to be ready to be firm and give them the example of being firm. And so I don't know when that comes up. It doesn't necessarily come up in the first week, but you got to recognize it and be willing to stand firm and say, like, without saying I'm the boss, but also understanding and saying, like, I know that I've got to step up and help make sure that they recognize, like, there is a chain of authority here that if we have to pull it, we will, kind of thing, to make sure that you keep that respect element. So then when your humility comes into play, it really is seen more as joking versus imposter syndrome. So it's kind of a little bit of everything there, but hopefully that answers some of your questions.
Yeah, it's about awareness. It sounds like, you have to be aware when you're sticking into old habits. I definitely find that for myself, a need to be really honest with myself. Like, why did I feel like I needed to cut the tension with a joke about me and not, just let the moment sit? And I love that, to spend your time in meetings and in calls and in relationship to your colleagues, being conscious about how you are showing up and how you are therefore being perceived. Because if you are the boss, then you are the boss. Like, that's not up for debate. So I love that solid footing that you sort of pictured.
There's one thing I'll add is it is hard. We just had a baseball Rockies game recently, and the employees came in. I would have been the one that was one of the later ones to stay out, and all of a sudden it shifts, and it's hard. You want to be friends with everybody, and so you got to keep that in mind. And so I'm not saying it's an easy thing, and don't be shy. Like I said, I'm happy to be a resource for anybody as you kind of go through that shift, because it definitely is a shift, and you've got to be ready to hold your authority where needed and understand where your authority lies, but also, be relatable at the same time.
Totally. Thank you. And there's one question in the chat here that I actually would just love to end on, because it talks a little bit more about the tactical, and it also, I'm just hoping that maybe there's some resources in here that we can tease out of you. So you're now president and CEO of Altvia. Also, if you want to talk a little bit about like what Altvia does, I realize that we didn't even talk about what your company does. But how do you ensure that you are continuously growing as a person? What are your resources? Who are you following on LinkedIn? What are you reading? How do you ensure that you haven't just arrived, but that you continue to grow forward?
Okay, this is the perfect example of leaning into my weakness. I always joke, like, don't ask me about, like, I don't know if the last time I've read a book, candidly. I am incapable of sitting still. I'm a doer. So I'll listen to a book, don't get me wrong, but I am not one. And I've learned this in all honesty. And I think I've worked with people who quote all the books they read and rely on that. I'm a big believer in learning through experiences and trusting my gut. So I think I started to get completely overwhelmed by all the resources that there honestly are out there. Just candidly, like, you can listen to podcasts, which I do. Listen to podcasts is probably my number one. So you can search out there, Spotify, while I'm walking or taking the dogs, whatever you're doing. That's the easiest one for me to do, but find what's easiest for you, because the same thing doesn't work for everybody. And the number one thing I would say is don't get overwhelmed by it, because it can be overwhelming. And there are times where you just need to understand, like, just trust your gut. I guarantee you the experiences that you've had are specific to you and that you've learned for a reason. And you're not going to find every answer in a book. And so you just have to be, like I said, kind of willing to lean into that. There are a couple really good books that I've read or listened to, at least. I mentioned it before, You Can't Know It All. That's what the book is called. It's a great one where you learn, really, it talks about what it feels like to go from being the expert leader to being the spanning leader. That's a great one. And then The Entrepreneurial Operating System has been really helpful for me as well. There are a couple spin-off books from that, like Traction, and other components that'll help, especially if you're looking to start a business or you're in a business where, you think it could use a little more structure to get things done. You could easily be the person to kind of come in and recommend this as an operating system for the business and be probably a hero pretty quickly. And there are other ones that are out there similar to the EOS model, but I do think it's been really beneficial to build some framework around the business and help us scale to the next step. So those would be a couple that, kind of come to mind.
Fantastic. Well, I cannot believe it, but we've made it to the end of our time. I feel like that just flew by so quickly. I am feeling so inspired and so grateful for your time and your energy and your experience. I feel like I couldn't have taken notes faster when you were speaking. So I hope that extends to the folks that joined us. Thank you for your time. Any last notes or things you want to mention before we close out our session today?
No, I'm happy to be a resource to anyone. Like I said, people never shut the door to me when I asked for help. And I'll never forget that guy saying, like, the amount of people that, come and sit on this couch, and I've never said no to a meeting, is what he said, because you never know who you're going to meet. And so I encourage you. I'm happy to meet with anybody, anytime. Want to be a resource. And I'm sure at some point I'll probably need the favor returned.
Fantastic. Well, just to close us out here, I just want to say thank you again, Bree, for being with us. I'm just going to share my screen real quickly and get to, we've already seen all of this. Our next events. I just want to let folks know that on the 21st, we have a really exciting event coming up about interview skill building for career pivoters. It says career pivoters, but it's actually for everyone who just needs to talk about their interview skill building and really make sure that you are in tip-top shape before you have your next interview for your next job. It's an exciting panel. We're really looking forward to it. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Bree, again. Wishing everyone a wonderful rest of your week and a rest of your day, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.